Hi, everyone.
Okay.
How are you? I'm okay for a Monday. Thanks for asking. Today we are going to get into a bunch of different things. So as Scott mentioned, my name is Melanie. I'm a librarian and I'm the library director here at the college. The library has more than just what you think of in terms of typical libraries. So we have books and newspapers and magazines. We have computers to access research databases. We'll talk a little bit about that. What else happens in the library? Studying individually, with groups. What else is in the library? I know you've been there. I recognize at least a few of you. What else is happening in the library? Okay, tutoring and testing. So just a heads up, I have really terrible hearing. I went to way too many concerts, so you have to project. So I heard tutoring. We have a math center and a writing center and subject tutors for some of those challenging classes, like anatomy and physiology or statistics. And we have a proctoring center. So if you are unable to take a test in regular class time, you can make the arrangement with the library and with your teacher to take a test with us. So there's a lot of different options at the library. In addition to being a tutoring center and a collaborative learning space, we do have little quiet study areas in the back or in the group study rooms. So today we're going to talk about a college-level research process. Because research in college and what your professors expect from you is different. Some of it might be similar to what you did in high school, but a lot of it's going to be different. And trying to understand what professors expect will help you succeed. So when they say, oh, I need scholarly sources for my research papers, or I need to use reliable websites for a presentation, where do we go? How do we find those things? How do we know that it's appropriate for college research? So we'll start with a process. And you are going to need something to write with. Turn that down for a moment. Something to write with and something to write on. So, something more than your phone. In college, you start your research when you get an assignment, right? Someday when you are an expert and you have your master's and your PhD, you'll start doing research just because you just love it so much and you're really interested and want to know more. But for right now, you're probably doing research because you have to. Right? Most college assignments or classes will have a paper or a project, a presentation, something that is based on research. And most of your college teachers will tell you to choose your own topic. Why? Why do you think they do that? Okay, so you pick something you like. Because what's like the average length of a college research paper, do you think? 10 pages? No, I think that's about right. So if you're going to write 10 pages on something, hopefully it's something you're interested in, something you want to know more about. Why else do you think they make you pick a topic? This could be really different than high school. In high school, I remember teachers giving us a list. Like, oh, you can research the causes of the Civil War, or you can pick themes in Romeo and Juliet, right?
It adds like another layer of thinking.
Yeah, yeah, it adds another level of thinking to you and to the class. So in like a biology class, you're not going to get to cover everything in depth. So the teacher will say, pick a topic, anything related to the chapters in the book. So you get to go in depth, and you get to really understand that issue. Okay, so choosing a topic already, we're probably doing something different than our high school experience, unless you had some pretty cool high school teachers, which you may. What's the very first thing you do when you just need to look something up? No. I'll try this side. It's really light, huh?
I know.
Okay. We Google. A librarian is telling you, yes, this is the very first thing that you do. Let's be real. And what's one of the first things that comes up in your Google searches? Okay. There's Wikipedia, also ads, yes. Sometimes the advertising blends in really well and they get you to click on it. Wikipedia, so Wikipedia, you're going to use it for your research? But why?
I used to stuff Wikipedia, that's it.
Okay, awesome. So again, a librarian is telling you, yes, it's okay to start with Google, and yes, it's okay to start with Wikipedia. If it's a good Wikipedia page, they'll have references, right? They'll have links that will lead you to other paths. What else is Wikipedia good for? Why is it a good place to start your research?
Are you trying to get to the click on the right-hand corner from the top and features, and then click on Chrome or web browser. And it shows
Yes. Okay. There we go. So, why else is Wikipedia good? It might have links to other sources. I'm going to go to one of my favorite topics, therapy dogs. So let's say I'm trying to give a presentation to the president of the college, and I want to say, we need therapy dogs in the library. There's really good research, it's going to lower your blood pressure, it releases good endorphins, right? Do I list Wikipedia in my sources to the president?
I think it's for
No, it could give us
leadership.
other sources. What else do we get from this? How else is it helpful at the beginning of your research process?
Breaks it up in the section.
Yeah, it breaks it up. You can kind of understand some subtopics or related topics. Like, wow, maybe I want to do my 10-page paper, part of it on the psychological benefits, part of it on the social benefits of pet therapy. It can also give you some synonyms or related words. So I typed in pet therapy. What else should I be looking for? What other words could I use? Service dog, okay. Service animals. Sorry?
Emotional support.
Emotional support, dog, animal. There's even equine therapy, dolphin therapy. So Wikipedia is actually a pretty good place to start because it breaks down topics, it gives you related ideas, it hopefully will give you links to something more reliable than Wikipedia, right? And why isn't it reliable? Anyone can edit it. We're going to talk a bunch today about like who writes things, who creates information, and just asking ourselves, where did this come from? So this is a helpful tool, but we don't really know where it comes from, right? Like anyone can edit it. When we're looking at Google and Wikipedia, we might also see news articles. These are, got any more markers in your bag? Yes. Thank you.
I'm sorry about that. Marker budget is shrunk.
So news sources, like current events, are a really great place to get ideas for research projects. So you might be like, what is happening that I really care about, that I'm interested in, and I want to know more about? Also, at the beginning of your research process, depending on the class, you might have a really useful textbook. So textbooks are not just expensive sources of information, but they can break down a topic for you, right? And they might give you some ideas of how to research it further. So we got our assignment. We chose a topic. At this point, by the way, it's already a great time to chat with a librarian or to stop by your professor's office hours and get some feedback on the topic. This is our background information part of the process. And this is something that your teachers, your professors may not tell you about because they're already experts in their subjects. So they don't need to go to Google or Wikipedia. But you, as student scholars, you do need to do some background information searching. You want to get an overview on some topics before you dive into the scholarly research. You with me? Okay. I heard at least one. Yeah. One person is with me. Excellent. Yes. Okay. So, then we ask research questions. This eventually turns into your thesis statement. What's a thesis? Thesis is your argument? Yeah, thank you. Your argument, your main point, what you're trying to prove or establish. But we start with a research question, questions usually, plural, because you want to be open-minded to whatever you find. If you start with just a very specific thesis statement, like, I'm going to write my research project on how organic fruit is better for you. And you start looking at the research and you find out they actually haven't proven that yet. There hasn't been longitudinal, long-term studies about that. So you might say, I got to change my topic. I got to drop out of the college. So it's better to start with questions, because then you're open to whatever you might find. And if you think about the who, what, where, when, why, how, the why and the how is usually the really good stuff. That is where you can dive in and say, like, why or how is this issue occurring? How is it impacting certain groups of people? What are the causes behind something? How can we prevent it from happening? So just like thinking of those kinds of questions, those will lead you to hopefully a nice researchable topic. Now, we get into collecting evidence. And this is what your teachers are usually referring to when they say you need to do research. They're usually not talking about the Wikipedia stage, right? Remember, because they just take that for granted, they already have that knowledge. But the collected evidence is when we get into scholarly research. What is that? I'll give you a hint. It's built in. Scholarly. Who writes it? Scholars. Okay. How do you know if someone's a scholar?
They're educating themselves.
Educating. Can you tell? There might be letters after their names, like degrees, right? MD, PhD. There might be a university listed after their name. And that means they're a professor or a researcher there. They're not a student at that school. They're an established expert in the field. And why would we trust what scholars say?
Because they're qualified.
Sorry?
They're qualified.
They're qualified, right? They've gone through a lot of schooling, they've studied that topic, and they really become experts in it. Sometimes your teachers will call this academic research. Sometimes they're going to call it peer review. This collecting evidence that's peer reviewed. What does peer review mean, do you think? Reviewed by other scholars, yeah. It's not like reviewed by other people on Yelp. It's reviewed by people in that field. So if you're a criminologist and you go to publish a study on profiling and who's pulled over in traffic stops, and your research gets reviewed by other criminologists, not just random people, but people who really know that field. So it's a very rigorous process because then they can question the methodology was not very good, or the sample size was very limited. So other experts in that field get it. And it's the same in any field. If you're a neurologist, other neurologists are reading it. If you're a historian, other historians are reviewing your work. Does that make sense? I see one nod. Okay, two. Great. So collecting evidence, this is usually a part of the research that your teacher is expecting. So you have to recognize that there's some other steps to even getting here. But obviously at this point, great time to chat with a librarian and just be like, help, here's the topic I'm thinking about researching. I need scholarly academic sources. So good time to ask it. Now, we write, revise, and cite. We turn it in and do it all over again for every college class until you die. No, until you become an expert and then you're the one that knows everything in that field and you are creating your own assignments because you're just so excited about it. Now, this process is not one directional. Meaning, as you're writing, you might say, I don't really have enough to fill 10 pages yet. I might need a good quote or a statistic or something to beef up this one section, so I gotta go back and look for more evidence. Or, as you're doing your research, you might find, well shoot, there isn't really a lot on organic fruit, so I might need to revise my research question a little bit. As you're doing that, especially when you're looking at scholarly evidence, you might have to go back to Google because you might need to look at like every few words in a really dense academic source. You might need to do some Googling to get through it, to understand what you're reading. Because we're not experts yet. And until you turn your paper in, or you give your presentation or your group project or whatever it is, your topic is still fluctuating, right? So we don't want to be too attached to this or to our thesis statement. Until we turn it in, it's easier to revise your paper or your project to match the evidence than it is to try to fit evidence into your paper that doesn't fit. Have you seen Law and Order? I know Scott has, okay. I saw a couple. Law and Order, or like any of those crime shows, right? Someone is murdered in the first few minutes, and then the police, what do? They investigate, they like walk the streets, they interview people, eyewitnesses. The CSI guys get their blood spatter samples and DNA evidence. Is it usually who they thought it was from the very beginning of the episode? The episode would be like 10 minutes long. So it's never what you think it's going to be. You're open to what you find. And then you have to put together that evidence in a way that's compelling for the jury or for whatever the episode is. You know, they need to be able to prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that this is what happened and here's who did it and how they did it. Right, so if you are approaching your research like a Law and Order episode, you want to be persistent. You've got to sometimes keep going back and maybe asking slightly different questions, looking at the evidence in a different way, but you're open until it's over, right? Until the very end of the episode. You have to be willing to kind of move fluidly in this process. Does that make sense? Okay. Do we see why we wouldn't want to do this the night before our paper is due? That's going to be really stressful. And I will help you. If you come by the library or email me the night before your paper is due, I'll do what I can. But really, it's going to show in your final project. So giving yourself the time to really, well, of course, pick that topic that's interesting to you, and then like be willing to dig in and be persistent. That's going to give you the better product, and that's where you're going to learn and grow and be a scholar yourself. Okay, that's our process. Now we're going to get into scholarship. Scholars. In college, so when you close your window, it just really goes away, huh? Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay.
And then there's a clicker too if you want to use it. It should be separate now.
Awesome. So there are 3 areas in higher education and academia in general. This is simplifying it, but there are 3 basic areas. Science, social science, and humanities. In college, eventually you're going to pick a major that is falling somewhere in one of these areas. These are called disciplines, and these are the way scholars research and understand the world. Think about classes that we offer at LTCC. What's a science class? Give me a subject that I would put under science. Okay, what else? Physics? Any science classes you might take here or when you transfer? Biochem, physics. No one's taken, just thinking, poor Professor Valentine, no one's mentioning geology. What was it? Like astronomy or astrophysics? Okay. Any other sciences you can think of? Anatomy. That's AMP. I'm really. That's a pretty good start. How about a social science? What do you think of when you think social science? Psych. Sociology.
Not economics.
Yeah. Economics. Business. So, what else is in social science? I'm going to put anthro here. Is anyone interested in healthcare or working in a garden? Where do you think that would go?
Between science and
Okay, yeah, like if you're into nursing, there's aspects of that are going to be very sciencey, and there's aspects that are going to be like patient care, intercultural communications, those important things.
Is like engineering a social science?
I'd kind of put it more on the sciences, but yeah, you see where I'm going, that there's some blurred lines, some interdisciplinary areas. How about humanities? What's missing? Think of classes that are not already here.
Art classes.
Art? God hear yourself. Sorry?
history of the Beatles.
I'll go to history. Philosophy. English. Literature.
Well, just like another language.
Yes, awesome. Spanish, French, sign language. Okay, so let's see if we can kind of crystallize what these disciplines mean. Science. We think about a lab coat, like a magnifying glass or a microscope. What are scientists studying in biology, chemistry, physics? Yeah, like the physical, the natural world, the world around us, right? But maybe down to the molecular level. How things interact. So this might be with anatomy and physiology, for example. And an expert might be looking at, well, how do athletes develop different bone density, right? So they're trying to movement and how that impacts the body and how that's connected. So I like that, the interrelated piece. So scientists, the way they approach a research project is very much is asking questions and making a hypothesis. So in high school, you may have had like the scientific method, right? You have to ask a question, and then you've got to test it. So give me an example for that organic fruit example. How would we test if organic fruit is better?
One person's diet consists exclusively of organics, the others do not.
Okay, so we're doing a long-term study. We've got this person that eats junk food and whatever else, and then someone else is only eating organic. Okay. You can see how that would be a challenge to research, because there might be other factors. Maybe one of them exercises a lot. Maybe one of them lives in an area where there's a lot of pollution. Okay, so when we think about an experiment in the sciences, we're like trying to control those variables and test for it, and then test again and see if we get the same results. So in the sciences, if you are someone who is just really super interested in this, the research looks different. You may not be writing super long research papers. You might be in the lab. You might be gathering bacterial samples and culturing them in a petri dish. Science is very much its own field with its own values, and in that discipline, if you're a science student, you approach research this way. You with me? Okay. Social science. What do social scientists study?
People.
Kind of built in. People. Social. Society, right? They're looking at the world around us and asking questions about human behavior. Why do people do what they do? Are there patterns and trends in that behavior? Just trying to make sense of the world around us, but differently than a scientist. So in science, we were talking about, okay, you would do a study, maybe you're scraping fruit for different pesticides, right? That's like a science study. How would social sciences look at organic fruit? How would a social scientist study that? Are they going to put people under a microscope? Right?
Effects on community.
Effects on community, okay. So how would they go about that? Maybe they would be, maybe they'd be looking at, okay, surveys, yes. Focus groups, maybe interviews, right? A social scientist is going to do research that involves people and their experiences. They may also be looking at data. So, to Rosie, right?
Yeah.
To Rosie's point, it might be, can you look at a community and see their access to organic fruit based on zip code, based on socioeconomic status? Are there a lot of dollar stores? Is there a big box store? Does that impact people's access to organic fruit? So social scientists are going to study a problem a different way than a scientist would. And they're gathering evidence, but it's different kinds of evidence. So that criminology example I gave, looking at the number of people who are pulled over and what race, ethnicity, age, gender, etc. are they. Looking at the stats and then analyzing that for patterns. So with the social scientists, it's also a very rigorous process, but it looks different than if you are going to be a science student. Being a social scientist, you might be conducting a survey in a psychology class, right, where you've got to gather people's experiences, feedback, and then analyze that data. I just realized no one mentioned math. No math majors? I would say math is more in the sciences, but statistics might start to fall more into a social science, because you're often looking at bodies of evidence, of demographic information. Okay. Humanities. What do they study?
Expression.
Okay, history, expression. Keep going. And like, is there anything in common here? Culture, yeah, totally. So they, in the humanities, they're looking at cultural artifacts. And this might be like literal artifacts, like archaeologists digging up pottery from an Incan site. Or it could be looking at expressionism, different forms of art, fine art, theater, music, right? It might be studying the written language or the spoken language of a culture. In the humanities, we are examining these pieces of culture, whatever they may be. And how do we examine them? So let's say we're someone in anthropology or in history or in English. How would we study the organic fruit problem? Question. The scientists are... Sorry?
Did Neanderthals eat organic?
Okay, so they might be looking at... interesting. They might be looking maybe at some like forensic anthropology to see are there residues of certain, I don't know, chemicals in different generations or at different locations.
Which cultures even care if their foods are organic?
Yeah, totally. So they might be looking at it from, this, maybe doing like a cross-cultural sort of, or historical exploration of why certain cultures are more obsessed with this idea of organic. And why, and if it matters, like, do they live longer? Do they have healthier lives? If I am in the humanities, I might be creating an installation piece as an artist, like a multimedia, interactive exploration of going organic and what that means in today's society. I might be looking at all the episodes of Walking Dead and looking for how they approach eating certain types of people and try to link that to the organic question I've got. I know, it's nuts. Just stay with me. I might write a song or do a performance that helps to educate people about organic food and healthy food choices. Okay? So do you see how in each area, depending on what you are really interested in, it's going to look really different. Your research process is going to be all over the map. You might be in the lab, you might be crunching numbers, you might be conducting interviews, maybe doing some ethnographic research, trying to understand where that piece of culture fits in with the bigger society. Questions. So we did put some things kind of on the line. And that's to say not every discipline is so strict. There's a lot of really cool interdisciplinary work happening, meaning, I gave you the nursing example. Why do you think we put anthropology here? I happen to have an anthropologist in So Scott, may I ask, you were definitely thinking it's a social science.
Yeah, but certainly, like if you get into classics, like in archaeology, then you're getting the aspects of history that you could say are less about the gathering of evidence in the social scientific sense, and more like looking at the big trends in like the historical sense.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, they could kind of go in this direction, archaeology. Psychology at some schools is a science. And at some schools, it's a social science. What would make it a science? How would you approach psychology as a scientist?
They're talking about like neurotransmitters and the genes.
Yep,
Sort of.
totally. So at my previous institution, the psych department was very much about like behavioral psychology, doing fMRIs, seeing which parts of your brain light up when you look at certain images, like that kind of psychology. Think about a more social science version of psychology. What would that look like? Surveys,
Just period.
maybe case studies.
I guess more theoretical.
Maybe more theoretical, but I think there's some practical aspects too. Like I'm thinking more counseling, you know. So it's more of that interpersonal communication and trying to understand why people do what they do without like having access to a brain scan. That interaction. So there's more of a human perspective to it. Questions? Okay. So the beauty of a well-rounded college education is you're going to have to take classes in all of these areas, and that's a good thing because it might just spark something in you that you didn't even know you were interested in. And it might be challenging at times, but by knowing what discipline your teacher is coming from and like what the expectations are around the assignments, that'll help you do better in that class. Because you wouldn't want to approach a bio lab like an English major necessarily. You're bringing different skills to that research project. Thoughts? Okay. So we're going to apply what we just learned to a real life scenario. This kind of, do you see what this is? Have you heard of this garbage patch? There's like a big island of garbage floating around. Plastics. It's like a whole ecosystem has evolved on this floating trash. So we're going to approach this from these different disciplines and see what we come up with. You're going to have to kind of cluster. This is a weird shaped room.
We can move these tables a little bit.
Okay.
Move them around.
So what we're going to do...
I mean, we have swivel chairs, we can just bring them to seat.
Yes. We're going to scoot into roughly groups of 5. It says 6, but 5. So you can pull up next to people near you. And there are sources that I've made links for. So you can do this on your phone. Just when you're typing it, make sure it's case sensitive. So in your group, get together with 5 people roughly, and each of you is going to a different source. So within these 5. One of you is going to look at Garbage Patch 2, Garbage Patch 3, 4, 5, 6. Does that make sense? Okay. And you can do this on your phone. I also have some hard copies for anyone who prefers, like actually looking. Yeah, you can definitely do that. And what I want you to do is take a moment individually to skim, scan, scroll, flip through your source. So in your group, one of you is going to look at 2, one's going to look at 3, etc. And then I want you to debrief. Say, well, I looked at a magazine article. I looked at a scholarly journal article. Here's what I think is good about it. Here's what I think is not so good about it. So you're processing with each other about what you're looking at. And I will be asking each area to report back on which discipline they think their source is coming from. Questions? Okay, so configure yourselves in groups of 5-ish. And because we're talking about recycling, okay, so let's debrief with the class. Let's start with that one. So there's a handful of you in the room that have this particular source. Heads up. What is it? What kind of source is it? Magazine. Okay. How could we tell? Pictures. It would be printed in color, but I don't have a color printer in the library. Where did they get their information from? Christopher Johnson. Is that just some random person, or? I mean, they're a molecular biologist, so they interviewed people for this article that have some expertise. That sounds like a scholar. What else do we see about this? Benefits? Strengths? Those of you that had this article? Yeah, of the source. Okay, some background knowledge. Is it like super dull or boring? No. It seems pretty interesting for talking from molecular biology and plastics. The way that it's structured, I'd be interested in reading it, right? So they're making a complex topic. What is this, by the way? What discipline? Science, okay. So what is this about? Just for those of you who scanned it?
I made a plastic reactor.
Okay, so there might be like a scientific approach to this garbage patch. There's bacteria that can help break down plastics. So that's pretty cool, pretty interesting, right? And is this a scholarly source? No. So they interviewed a scholar, but it's not scholarly. It's missing something pretty important at the very end. Sources, yeah. Magazines, newspapers, most websites, like they don't have a bibliography. But scholars, experts, researchers, they'll always tell you where they got their research from. And especially in the sciences, they want you to be able to recreate that experiment, right? So if you're ever not sure, because this is coming from a science magazine, I think it's Popular Science. If you're ever not sure, like, well, this seems kind of expert, you want to look for those details. Who wrote it? Is this person a scholar? And where do they get their information from? Interviews. Probably did some research for it, but it's not a scholarly source. Does that make sense? I saw 2 nods. All right, we're going to switch. How about this one? So a handful of you looked at this. What is this? I heard newspaper and magazine. Fight it out. What is it? Okay, newspaper as opposed to a magazine? Like, how often does a newspaper come out? So newspapers, news sources are usually every day. Online news is like every minute. A magazine is maybe like once a month if you get a magazine subscription, right? It's 12 issues a year. So a newspaper, how did we know this was a newspaper? New York Times. So we just kind of knew the name, right? Pretty reputable news source. It's maybe better than citing like the Hollywood Tribune. Sorry if anyone works there. But it's fairly well known. They've got who wrote this? Do we know anything about Livia? Is she a scholar? Doesn't say. Okay. So if we were on the web version, we would click through, we'd maybe look to see. And a lot of times newspapers and magazines have like different journalists, different reporters working on the education beat, the science reporter, the arts and culture reporter, right? So they might be pretty well read and well informed and educated on that topic. But in a newspaper, they write about a different topic every day. So they're not like in-depth experts. They are more generalists rather than specialists. Generalists have to be able to report on anything that's happening in the world. A specialist, like some of these experts, are focused on one very narrow, very specific topic. So a reporter, a writer for a newspaper or a magazine is more broad. Now, what's a benefit of this source? Would you use it in your research?
Where does the information come from?
Yeah, where does the information come from? There's no bibliography. So there are some captions and sources. I think you'd have to kind of dig in deeper to find out, well, where did this come from? There's probably interviews. If you think about reporters going and asking, what do people think of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? And maybe they interviewed some scientists. Maybe they just interviewed people on the street. There might be things that you can follow up on. A lot of times news articles are citing scholarly sources, but they're simplifying it. What do you think of news? What's like a positive?
Recent?
It's recent. It's current. Yeah. So for a lot of things, a news article, a current event, is going to give you some insight into what's happening right now about a particular topic. These are usually really great for examples of how an issue is occurring, or where, or illustrate how widespread your topic is. You might be able to pull examples from different parts of the world or different parts of the country or California, and those current events will help indicate why it's important, right? Because it's affecting real people. It's usually like the news angle. Okay. How about this one? A handful of you, nope. This one, maybe. I know. So, a handful of you looked at this. What is this? A book. Is it the whole book? Why isn't it the whole book? It's a preview. They're not going to give you the whole book when they could still charge you for the book, right? So unless it's really old, like a classic work, you're not going to find it full text online for free. You'll find it through the library. But this is a book, a preview of a book. What's one of the benefits of using a book? Sorry?
There's a lot of information in it as opposed to like a short article.
Yeah, so more information than a short article. It's kind of like that Wikipedia thing that we looked at the beginning, where it breaks down your topic into big areas. So you don't have to read the whole book. You can use the table of contents or the index and say, oh, I really just want the one chapter on e-waste. Like, oh, I hadn't even thought about earbuds and phones and how that contributes to the plastic patch problem. Okay, so a book is similar to some of that background information. It can really give you some good insight into a topic. It's usually written in a more broad perspective.
Plus, like, when an informational book be more fact-checked, because, like, you're spending money publishing the book and actually, like, distributing it.
That's a really good question. Yeah, I think that's a good observation. Most often with a book, it's going through, pretty long editing process. It's not cheap to print, so there may be fact checkers and researchers that are kind of questioning what it is before it goes out. Unless you're just like publishing your own book for free or for cheap on Amazon. But yeah, I think there's a level of credibility that comes with the book. What do we know about this author? Anything? Can we tell anything from the cover? Have you seen that little panda before? World Wildlife Federation, is that what it is? So this is a publication. It's a book, but it's associated with an organization that is known for doing environmental work. So even when it seems like a pretty reliable source, you always want to ask, like, well, who created this? Where is it coming from? And there is a perspective there, a bias maybe in how they present their information, because clearly they're about protecting the pandas.
Plus, for the book, that not all the information is going to come from the author. So then you have like more like expanded like resources.
Yeah. For any academic source, if you're able to find a bibliography, that's your goal. Like, you might think, I only found this one book, but they've got sources, and that means someone has done the research. They've helped gather that information for you. There's clearly more on that topic that you can then track down. You can go down a lot of rabbit holes. What's one of the downsides of a book? Takes forever to read. Well, I did say you could use the table of contents and the index. Just read the chapter, because the chapter is going to be like the same length as the scholarly article anyway. But outdated. By the time a book is published, the information's already like several years old, right? It just takes a long time to publish a book. So this one's 2006. That's not too bad. But then, yeah, you can see here they're working to save endangered species. So the information might be totally good. But you just want to recognize like where it's coming from. What's an org, a .org?
They're not writing it to make money.
Okay, it's non-profit, right? Not for profit, as opposed to a .com, which is for profit, right? An organization like the American Red Cross, that seems pretty legit. Like, oh, I would cite that if I was doing research on heart disease and prevention or whatever. A .org is also Planned Parenthood. It's also the National Rifle Association. So just because it's non-profit, doesn't mean it's good or has, any org, any organization does have a mission or a purpose that they're trying to perpetuate. So you're just kind of questioning as you see things where it's coming from. Okay. This one. What is it?
So, literature.
It's basically just like a research article.
Sorry?
A really big research article.
Research article.
That's what I got from it.
Yep. How do we know?
It's scholarly.
How do we know it's scholarly?
catch your eye. It looks like it's just all information.
Yeah, okay. It's not eye-catching. Compared to what we just saw, even the book looked better than this. So who's the audience for a scholarly article? Researchers, other scholars and students in that field. It's not eye-catching. There's really no pictures. What do we have instead? Graphs, charts, maybe formulas, how they gathered their data, how they processed it, what they found. Why is it so long? It's 23 pages. There's magazine articles, it's only like a handful of pages, and they have pictures.
It's very like, specified towards like a topic.
Very specific, very focused. So this is, when we think about our research process, why doing background information, those newspapers and magazine articles, they can really help you understand the topic before you go straight into this really dense, written by an expert for other experts on how they conducted their research. Those of you who looked at this one, what discipline is it?
I would say social science.
Social science, okay. So how can we tell? Behavior, yeah. It's looking at like packaging and how that appeals to a consumer. Right? So they might be looking at like patterns and trends related to what people buy and why they make those choices. Social science. What's a benefit of this?
Having 90-something research.
It's got a huge bibliography. So this, scroll. Nope. Okay. It's fun. It's like every day is an adventure.
Yeah.
So this is that gold mine I was talking about, right? You can find all of their sources and really just have a ton of research. So this might catch your eye. It's the scholarly version of the Wikipedia references, right? But this is like, I could use any of these, and they're going to be probably pretty good sources. In the article itself, what's this? No. Okay. What's that? Or that?
It's like the citation.
The citations, the in-text citations. So as student scholars, you're expected to write in a way that is like the scholars in your field, and that means both in your bibliography and as you write your paper. So you're giving credit every time you say an idea that came from somewhere else. Even if you put it in your own words, you still build in these in-text citations. And those in-text citations refer to something in your bibliography. It shouldn't be in your bibliography if it's not somewhere in an in-text citation. Let me rephrase that. If you don't have in-text citations in your paper, then your bibliography is empty. There's nothing that you're citing. You, as a student scholar, you're expected to connect those dots. You cite the research that's come before you, and you build it into your paper, and you put it together in a new way. So that's what makes it interesting or compelling, is how you put the evidence together to prove a point, to help explore an issue. Okay. Questions about this? What's one of the downsides? It's real long. It's hard to read. There's no colors. So that can be a challenge. If you are not yet an expert in environmental science or in marketing, consumer behavior, business behavior, this could be something that's pretty challenging to read.
So you say it's almost too specific.
Too specific.
You're trying to do like a run.
Yes. This happens all the time, where students are researching and they're like, this isn't what I want. I just need something that's going to talk about my issue this other way. So a lot of times, a chapter in a book is going to be more useful because a scholarly study is how they did their research in a town in Norway, or the population analysis that they did involving senior citizens in Florida and whatever, in Tampa. So the way research is conducted is very specific, very narrow. You might be looking more for the bigger picture, which a lot of times comes from the book. Or if you're looking at a scholarly article, I always recommend reading the abstract. What's an abstract? Sorry, I'm going to scroll really fast.
The summary kind of.
Okay, so the abstract is that the authors provide their summary, this is what we researched, this is how we researched it, this is what we found. So that is like the most helpful part usually of a scholarly article. Also the introduction, because that's where they're telling you why this is an important thing, why it matters. And then I like to look at the discussion, results, conclusion towards the end. The middle is like all the research that they did. But usually you want to find what were their findings. So if you're citing a source, you want to take a good look at all of it, but looking at those pieces can help you figure out, like, what was this research really about? Abstract, intro, and conclusion can help you decipher that. Questions? Okay. Real quick, what was this one? What kind of source?
It's kind of like a text.
Yeah, a book. This, again, just a preview, but one of these chapters can be really helpful and useful. You don't have to read the whole book for research. That's a lot. Yeah. How about this one? What was this source? Was it a scholarly source? No. How can we tell just from what we've got here? Pictures. Okay. Yes, probably not scholarly. What else? Where is this coming from? A magazine, right? Time magazine. Okay. So it could be a pretty good in-depth article looking at this garbage problem. It's current, as opposed to like the books that we were looking at. What do we think this source would be good for? How could we use it in a research project, paper, presentation?
It gives like a lot of information, like a problem, like a product plan.
Okay, gives you a good overview of the problem. I'm thinking like the visuals are really stunning and could be part of a presentation. You could put some into your PowerPoint or your slideshow or whatever to help illustrate the scope of an issue. Magazines and newspapers are also really good at giving you those statistics. Like, did you know 1 in 4 college students has herpes? 1 in 4. That's a lot. So those statistics really help bring an issue home to your audience. So you might be translating that from your paper into a presentation. It was 1 in 4. I might be on it now. So something like this, a newspaper or magazine, can really give you some compelling bits that help you connect the scholarly stuff to why it's important, why it matters. Okay. We're going to wrap up. We looked at a lot of different things, and I just want you to be mindful that throughout your college research process, for every paper, project, presentation, there are good and appropriate times to use Google, to use newspapers, to use magazines. There's also, and it always depends on the teacher and the assignment and the discipline, there's time for evidence. So you want to understand in your field what counts as evidence. So in music, I have students right now coming to check out actual music CDs in the library. And that's one of their sources. They're looking at or listening to the cultural art. That's different than, the geology students who come and check out the box of rocks that we have. And they've got to identify igneous, metamorphic. So different kinds of information, different disciplines, they're all helpful and valid. You have to really be critical at what you're looking at and just figure that's not really appropriate for my final bibliography, but it really helps me understand the issue. Or I can get a good source, a good quote from this, but it's not going to be the only thing I use. One last thing with disciplines. I'm going to scan here. You may have used MLA style in high school. Is that correct? You're like, I don't have to use it ever again. MLA is one of the most popular citation styles. It's used in the humanities. So in your English and writing classes, this is typically where you've had to use MLA as a citation format. APA is used more in science and social science. It's the American Psychological Association. MLA is the Modern Languages Association. So your teachers are not trying to torture you. Really, I promise. By saying you have to use the style of the discipline. As you become an expert, a scholar in your field, you start to adopt the same ways of talking and speaking, and that really complex language is the language you get to speak. But when you're starting out, you're probably using one of two styles. There's a dozen styles, so this is the two that you're most likely going to use. Can you see a difference in this? Just kidding. Okay, there we go. Nope. Okay, that's fine. Can you see a difference from the APA to the MLA style? Like a formatting difference. I'm going to see if anyone on this side can tell me. It's like those puzzles at the dentist's office. You have to pick what's different from one picture to the next. So you have to do those.
First name.
First name. Okay. So the MLA style, we know it was written by someone named Joshua. What is the gender of the first citation? Do we know? And that's by design, right? In the sciences and the social sciences, they're recognizing that the gender shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter if that's written by Chris or Christine or Carl. So in that first style, we see just initials, first initial, middle initial. And we don't know who the author is by gender. And that's important. In MLA, they do list the full name. So MLA, they care about who that person is. It's like Shakespeare, William. That matters. And APA would just be Shakespeare, W. How about another difference?
Where the year
where the year is. So APA, they put it right after the author's name. They must think year is important, right? They think currency of information in the sciences and social sciences, that matters. Where is the year in the MLA style? It's like almost at the end. So in MLA, it doesn't matter as much when something was published. It could be a historical work, it could be something that's from a different century, but they put the year towards the end. Any other differences that you can spot? This is just kind of for your information. Usually you're saving yourself some points if you pay attention to your citation styles. We'll say MLA spells out volume, number, issues. APA just does volume, issue. Right? The first number is always the volume, the second number is the issue. Okay, we are going to wrap up with a quick visit to the library website. From the campus homepage, how do I get to the library? The most important thing on the library homepage is my email address. It's library@ltcc.edu. Any point during your research, for any class, for the rest of your college career, library@ltcc.edu. That's going to go to me and also to our other adjunct librarians. We will help you do your research. We won't do it for you, but we'll save you a lot of time, and you're more likely to get a better grade after chatting with the librarian. So that's an important email address to save, to burn into your mind, library@ltcc.edu. And I know after today's class, you would never try to do all this research process the night before papers due. But at any point, even if it's the night before, just ask. Ask for help. We will help. Okay. On your cards that are around, I want you to write one thing that you found cool, interesting, useful from today. One thing that you found confusing, boggling, want to learn more about. And I should write this down for you. And one suggestion for our next research class, because I get to meet with the other college students. So, one thing you found cool, interesting, useful. That's not spelled right. One thing, but it's number two. One thing you found confusing, weird, boggling, that you'd like more information about, that maybe I could talk about in a different class. And one suggestion to make this session better for the other College Promise students. So that's anonymous, right? Whatever you think, don't hold back. You are leaving the cards here, and you're leaving these articles so I can use them for the next class. One thing you found interesting, useful, helpful. One thing you found confusing, weird, want to know more about. And any suggestions for making the session better the next time.
And I'll chat for a couple minutes to kind of sum up research.
Okay.
Try you?
Yeah.
Can I segue? Thank you at the end. So, let's see here. Just real quick. So in the Canvas site today, and this will kind of just connect a little bit with what Melanie was talking about, and I love her focus on the research process because it really is, I mean, she geared it at college students, but all of us who do research, it's so similar, what she's talking about, that cyclical process. So just on the Canvas site, you can also check out, because another side of this is if you're not doing your due diligence, doing your research, you can fall for fake news or bad news or information that's really suspect. If you watch the recent video on Netflix, The Great Hack or The Big Hack, I forget which it is, but about Cambridge Analytica, it's about how we're being manipulated by Facebook, by social media, by Instagram, so on an everyday basis. And you can also check out my piece on the value of research just to see what research is about and why we should engage in research. This is very similar to what she was presenting here. So again, this is from an academic textbook, but as you can see, it's this cycle. You're never sort of just finalizing your research. You're always seeing it as a cycle, as a process that goes on and on. Now, in addition to thinking about just like the information we get and the research that we conduct, obviously we rely on a lot of information ranging from common sense to tradition to authority figures, personal experience, and what the media presents to us. That's good, and I would say to complement what Melanie presented in all those articles, all of these articles that she gave you, those 5 sources, are great opportunities to just get a sense of a field or a particular problem, in this case, garbage and recycling and so forth. And then you can use your fine-tuned skills later to hone in on what information that you need and so forth. So it's not terrible to rely on things like personal experience and what the media presents to us, but if that's our only source of information, then kind of going back to George Orwell, if you're still reading in your literature classes 1984, you're under the influence of Big Brother, and people are telling you how to think and how to think about the world and how to see the world. So there's a challenge there. There's different types of research we engage in, both quantitative and qualitative, and those are going to span what Melanie talked about, the social sciences, the sciences, humanities. Typically, we would say quantitative is more probably in the scientific realm, but again, social scientists like psychologists often use quantitative data as well. If you check out my piece on the value of research, I kind of take you inside of how to do research, and I wrote this for a pretty popular audience, so it has a lot of nice graphics and stuff, and it's not usually this way. Most of the stuff that I write and publish, as Melanie was showing you, it looks like that article that has just, all text and no pictures. And a lot of publishers often don't have the money to give us opportunities to use photographs. In some of the books I published, upwards of $300 for one photo from a source that I had to pay for. And obviously you have to earn that back with your royalties, which often are not a lot. So it's always neat when you can have images and stuff. So just some values of research, talking about just engaging with the world, and it doesn't have to be social scientific research. It could be an art project. It could be something that you engage with in your music class. And it's just the fact that you're doing something on your own and you're not relying on others to tell you how things are. And I kind of close with some of these quotes here about anti-intellectualism and democracy. I like this quote here. Democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. And so we live in a time right now where politicians on the news will say something and people believe it sometimes. And there's a value of going through this process, what Melanie was talking about today, what I talk about in my short article. And it reminds me a little bit, if you've seen The Matrix, and maybe, has anyone seen The Matrix? The first one I really recommend. There's the choice that is given to Neo to take the red or the green pill, and this actually goes back to a lot of philosophical theory. You shouldn't do the blue pill, you should take the red pill, right? The red pill, it allows you to actually go and investigate and see potentially what lies beyond the reality that's given to you. And this actually goes back to Plato, the Republic, and the cave. There's a lot of philosophical thought embedded in the Matrix. But we encourage you to take the red pill and to actually engage with your reality and try to understand it instead of just allowing yourself to be duped or controlled by the media. It's what Noam Chomsky calls intellectual self-defense, a willingness to look at the facts with an open mind, not to put simple assumptions to the test and pursue an argument to its conclusions. That's really what we're talking about when we're doing research. So we'll kind of close on that because I think it's really important to use all the skills that you learned about today from Melanie to really put yourself to the test and challenge yourself and challenge others in your communities. So I will come around and collect your cards and your attendance sheets. And can we just thank Melanie today for the great presentation? It was really amazing.